Breaking up is hard enough, but when you have a mental illness, it is super hard. I mean, just think about it. A breakup is like a giant letdown. You put all this time and energy into a relationship with somebody that you loved and you cared for and you enjoyed, and now that's going away, and that really sucks. And it hurts, and there are days and nights where you just can't keep it together, and it feels like tears are always going to come out of your eyes, and sometimes you just miss them and you want them back, and it just, I hate it. I know everybody hates this feeling. A lot of times, especially if we're the person who was dumped, we want to know why, what happened, how did we get here? We've gone through so much together, we've tackled problems before, why is this problem so large that we can't figure out a way to fix it? And that's normal for everybody, but then you throw in mental illness and it's like, well, hold on a second. Is it mental illness that's causing the breakup? Is it a problem with me and whatever mental illness I have? What about my ex or my partner that we're really not sure what we're doing? Is it their mental illness? What's going on? I mean, one of the core problems with mental illness is relationships. It's problems with friendships, with work, and with intimate relationships. So it makes sense that mental illness could be a reason why there's a problem with you and what's going on with you and your ex or partner or however you look right now. And that sucks because you're wondering, like, okay, but is it the mental illness? Like, how much is the mental illness? Let me do an example here. So let's say your mood has been really low. Maybe you've been having a hard time at work and that's been bleeding over into the relationship. Well, but is it just your mood because work sucks and you've been having a hard time dealing with that? Or is it part of the mental illness and you have been trying to manage that? Maybe you got depression and you're trying to manage the depression, but you just can't overcome it. And so is it right for your partner to blame you for something that you're trying to work on, but you can't fix? And maybe that's valid. Maybe it's valid for them to say that, you know what, I just can't handle it. Whether you're trying or not, it's just not good enough for me. But the problem is, after relationships, we usually have all of these questions already swirling in our heads about who's to blame and what could I have done and what could they have done and how could we have gotten this to work out. But now you throw in mental illness and it's like every question is colored by, well, what about the mental illness? How much of what happened was due to the mental illness? But then what makes this even more complicated is the way that our body reacts to breakups in general, because breakups are a loss, and we have a system in our body, the panic and grief system, that activates whenever we feel like somebody's moving away. But if you have something maybe like borderline personality disorder, where you have a fear of abandonment, that system might just come online more often in general, and it might be hypersensitive, and when a breakup happens, it may come on with a fury. Or if you're somebody who's normally depressive, that same system, because it's panic and grief, the grief may come on really strong, and you may start having suicidal thoughts, you might start feeling like you can't get out of bed, you just can't do anything, because the breakup is a major life stressor, it's a major life event, and our bodies react to that. And of course I'm oversimplifying here, but there's other systems in your body that might come online, like the fear system or the lust system, and you may be not really sure of how you're feeling, and again, it's hard to untangle what is how much of this is just like normal confusion after a breakup, and how much of this is like extra pieces of your brain firing, making it really hard to comprehend what's going on. If you don't have a mental illness, it's probably not as severe for you. But if you do, it's probably really hard to get through a breakup. Alright, so I've kind of talked about how like your emotional experience and your mood might be affected by mental illness during a breakup, but also your thinking could be interrupted, which just makes the confusion even harder. Because with some mental illnesses, especially during a breakup, which is a period of high stress, which might make your body react in more extreme and more severe ways, you may have trouble, for example, with your prefrontal cortex, which is the part of your brain that does reasoning, and so your emotions may more easily take over and make it harder for you to think. Usually in the body, your emotional system gets priority because it's more wired for survival than your thinking brain. And depending on what your particular mental illness is and what symptoms you have, you may wind up feeling things like paranoia during a breakup, or you might feel something like dissociation, both of which can make it hard to judge what's going on. If you feel paranoia, you may wonder if your ex is maybe part of something, if he or she has they have ganged up on you in some way, and this is a conspiracy against you. If you dissociate, you may have a really hard time remembering like what even happened in the relationship and why are we breaking up again? And you may have to find yourself answering the same questions over and over and over again. Maybe you're more obsessive, and so you get stuck on one particular thing and you just can't let it go, and you can't it's all so stressful when you have a mental illness and you're breaking up. And then, of course, there's our attachment styles and how our attachment styles play out during a breakup. Because during a breakup, you know, if you're preoccupied, anxious, you're probably going to want your ex around all the time, which may not actually be the best thing for you, but it's the way that your body naturally gravitates, and maybe that's how you got together with your ex in the first place. But if you're somebody who's more fearful, avoidant, you might be sometimes wanting your ex really close to comfort you, but then also feeling like that's way too intense, and maybe that was the reason you're breaking up in the first place, because you wanted that distance. Maybe if you're dismissive avoidant, you just always want your ex not to be around, and maybe you know that hurts your ex, and maybe you don't want to do that. You don't want to hurt your ex, but it just feels like way too much, and it's all confusing. I think the really important thing to remember here is that your mental illness is not really your fault. You are responsible to try to manage it. You're responsible to try to help do what you can in the relationship, but mental illness is an impairment of your brain. Mental illness does affect your life every day in very real, daily ways. So yes, you got to take responsibility for it. Yes, you should work on the things that you can, but you can't beat yourself up over when the mental illness wins over you, because sometimes your body just doesn't function. Sometimes people can't do it. And, you know, if you're the one who's being broken up with and your ex has said like X, Y, and Z are the reasons why, and those are things that have to do with your mental illness, it hurts. And it sucks, but maybe they just can't deal with that. I know, it sucks. It's not fair, but they deserve to be able to have the life that they want to live too. But at the same time, I don't want you to beat yourself up over not being able to give that to them, because maybe there will be somebody else in life who can understand what you're going through, maybe better than they can, and who can give you the things that you want. This is a sore spot, and I don't want to hurt anybody, so I don't want to talk too much into this, but I just want you to know that you shouldn't add more pain to an already painful situation by hurting yourself over what your mental illness has made you do. And if your ex is trying to make you feel guilty or ashamed for it, don't let that stuff in. Now, this goes for people on the other side too who have initiated the breakup. You know, you may feel guilty about that. You may feel bad that you couldn't contribute to this relationship and keep it together the way that you wanted to, but you recognize that maybe this isn't the relationship for you. Don't beat yourself up if the mental illness is what's causing this. It's not your fault necessarily. Do take ownership for the fact that you have a mental illness, and that's maybe why you're breaking up and what's going on, and be transparent and honest about that. But again, don't allow that to eat away at your core, because I know it can. I've been there. And because this is a sensitive time, please recognize that it's really easy to allow all those symptoms to take over and make it really hard for us to see what's going on. And it becomes very, very easy to get very angry at our ex. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't. Of course, if it's an appropriate anger, then be angry. If you're frustrated, if you're disappointed with how things are, express that, totally. But also recognize when it is the mental illness that's making things seem a little bit worse than they are right now, and try to fight back a little bit against that. Try to fight back when your brain isn't really showing you things the way that you know that they probably really are. I do think that when you have a mental illness, it's just generally harder to deal with a breakup and a relationship in general, but I want to hear from you. If you have a mental illness, what has happened? How has it affected you during your breakup or your relationship? Let me know. I'd love to hear about it.